direct from the web, it's Billy Masters Live. And now, please welcome your host, Billy Masters.
Oh, showbiz. Oh my God, are we here? We're live. Oh, and there's nobody watching live. You know, remember COVID, children? Remember when people had nothing better to do, when I was the high point of your day? Oh, those wistful days. It was like vaudeville. Anyway, welcome to Billy Masters Live. Thank you. Monica's right on top of things. Today is Friday, April 25th, 2025. It's been a while. You know, I was looking. It's been almost 2 years since I've done a Billy Masters Live. I said I wouldn't be gone long. Fooled you. I was gone for a while. Anyway, okay, they know what day it is. Can we turn that off? I don't know. Well, they say they're turning it off. We'll see if they're going to turn it off. Anyway. Oh, it's off. Good. Anyway, I am back. And I said when I stopped doing these shows every week that we would do it only when there was a special reason to do it. Well, this is as special as it gets, I have to tell you. During COVID, one of our most popular guests was my good friend, my colleague, my, I don't know. I think my inspiration, I've said in the past, Bruce Vilanch. And we've been through many, many times. And he wrote this fantastic book called, actually, why don't I show a better version of it, called It Seemed Like a Bad Idea at the Time. Those of you who've been watching Billy Masters Live and seen Bruce on, I think he's our most popular guest, he's told a lot of these stories, and there's a point in the book where he talks about his inspiration for writing the book, and he talks about doing a lot of shows just like this during COVID and telling these stories and having young people who have discovered a lot of his work online ask him questions about it. And he's like, well, why don't I just write a book? So why don't I just get right to him? My good friend, my bon ami, Bruce Vilanch.
Hello.
How are you, darling? I am sitting here with the book, with a hard copy. They wanted to send me a digital copy, and I said, look, with Bruce Vilanch, either it's hard or it's nothing.
Thank God it's so hard. I thought you could also listen to it. It could be pillow talk.
Oh, no, I didn't know that. Is there an Audible book of it?
Which I had a lot of fun acting out some of these characters.
Oh, my God. Oh, then I'm definitely going to do that. Can they get, is that Audible or Amazon? Where
it's
is
Audible. That? It's, just go to Amazon and they'll tell you where it is. Or if you are anti-Amazon, as many are right now, just Google it and you'll see where it turns up. Google Bruce Vilanch audiobook and see what happens.
Did you have as much fun writing it as I had reading it?
Yeah, well, I've been telling the stories like to you and on the shows and for some of these stories for years, and so it was fun to kind of redact them, but of course, it was going to be in a book, and so I didn't. Yeah, it was not a book to like knock people, so I had to figure out how to talk about some people who were trapped in these things with me. But many of them are dead, so that made it easier. And a lot of them have also written memoirs with their versions of these things, so or they've gone on record. So that helped. I wasn't too constrained. But
what I love. Oh, go ahead.
Tell all, but it's not a tell all.
Well, no, because you've told actually. Some details you have kind of left out because you're a lot nicer in the book than I would be, because some of these things really have not scarred, like, oh, you need to go to therapy, but some of them were not real pleasant when they were happening.
No, they were fun, but yeah, some of them was. I mean, some aspects of them. I mean, it was never fun to be on the receiving end of a Paul Lynde tirade, because it was laced with every kind of slur. You mocky fag, low life kite, because he went he was a mean drunk, and when he was upset, which he frequently was, he would hold it in, and then it would all kind of come exploding out. But I wasn't the only one who was the target. I mean, I got to witness it, a lot of other people getting it. So, but that part wasn't fun.
It's funny you bring up Paul Lynde, because what I like about the book is that you don't just talk about the shows. You talk about the people. There's a lot of sidebars just for the youngsters who don't know who Paul Lynde was.
I had to put it because I realized I started the book with a story about Bob Hope, and I was talking to my 21-year-old niece, and she said, "Who's that?" So, it was like, I thought, okay, I better do this. And then I read Mary Rogers' book, which she died before she finished it. And then Jesse Green from the New York Times came in and finished it and added footnotes, because he knew that there were references to people in theater mostly who were long gone. And even a casual reader would wonder, who is she talking about? So I thought I was inspired by that. And also her book was hilarious and funny.
Well, it's encyclopedic too. It's like a glimpse into a moment in show business that we have lost. Exactly. But so is yours.
Mary Rogers, she was Richard Rogers of Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart's daughter. And her most famous thing is she wrote Once Upon a Mattress. She is
the mother of?
And she's the mother of Adam Getzel, who just opened Floyd Collins on Broadway and did Light in the Piazza. He wrote that. And
there you go. But again, that was a footnote. That was a visual footnote. The other thing
Mary Rogers. Was that a character?
That Mr. Rogers' mother.
Rogers. Was that the one with Tom Hanks? Was that Mary Rogers? I think it was.
What I love also about the book is that we know you're a writer, but I think of you more as a storyteller, as a raconteur, and you don't seem so precious about grammar or style. You write like I write. You write the way you speak. You're a monologist, really.
But I had an editor who theoretically was all of those things. So, he let me have my style, I guess. He wasn't like I used to be on the copy desk of the Chicago Tribune, where I would be correcting everybody. So, but I was younger then.
Oh, so much younger then. How did you decide the order? I found it so interesting, the order of the stories, because they're not chronological. Are you in an eclipse all of a sudden, Bruce Vilanch?
Yeah, I guess.
Surges.
It's a surge, but also it probably is. I have a big window and it's cloudy in LA. It was sunny when we started, but it'll come back. Anyway,
this happened with Christine Ebersol was talking to me on the set, and it just kept getting darker because she was in her dressing room and had no other lights. So as it got darker, anyway, how did you decide the order of the book?
Well, here it goes. Because Star Wars and the Brady Bunch I put in front because they're still around. I mean, there have been 900 iterations of Star Wars, and tomorrow on MeTV is Brady Saturday. So those don't go away. So I figured start with something that's familiar to a lot of people. And actually, the book, as you mentioned, started because of COVID lockdown podcasts and kids asking me questions about the Star Wars holiday special, because that was the thing they were most interested in. They found it on YouTube, and I did not realize it was alive, and that's what made me think there's a book in these things about how I lived, and so did these shows. It just came back, my ass is riddled with bite marks from these shows coming back to me.
I love how you start when you talk about the Star Wars show, and you basically say that George Lucas and all them really didn't understand what a variety show was. They had no idea what they were getting into.
I don't think George, I don't think George was sitting watching Sonny and Cher. It didn't strike me as being his meat. But They came to him and they said, we'd like to do a variety special. And in his mind, that meant some kind of organic musical. And he had 10 stories, and he was going to make 6 movies, which he eventually made. And he had these other 4 stories that he was selling to other platforms, and this was the last one. And I honestly do believe that if he knew what a variety special was, or what an original musical was, he would not have sold them a story that starred the Wookiees, who cannot sing, dance, cross the room without knocking something over, and they speak in no known language. They, as I'm fond of saying, they sound like fat people having orgasms. Trust me, I know. And so you had to write around that. You had to somehow integrate the elements of a musical show around these profoundly non-musical characters who were carrying the storyline.
Not only that, but it was so smart. Oh, go ahead. Oh, right. No, what I was going to say is I didn't, there's so much you learn in this book. Again, it seemed like a bad idea at the time. Hello. They were so smart that they were looking at this from a business standpoint, that this keeps the Star Wars name out there until the next movie came out.
That was the idea. And I think George was a little trepidatious because The Empire, which was the next movie in the shooting order, was much deeper than the first picture, than Episode 4, A New Hope, which is the first Star Wars. He got Jungian, and he had Yoda. He had Yoda spouting things. It was very Joseph Conrad. It was a lot of that kind of classic mythological stuff that the first one was much faster and looser with. So he was, I think, worried that the audience would not go with him on this journey, and so he was priming the pump. Why he chose this thing as a pump primer is anyone's guess. I mean, I thought it was the last thing at the bottom of the pile, and he said, "Okay, like I can use this."
You also break it down.
You
break it down. Oh yeah.
You also want to introduce Boba Fett, which I call Boba Fett.
Yes, well, you go into great detail about that.
Well, because it was, I think the original idea, he was trying to pitch an animated feature with Boba Fett, but he couldn't sell it. And so he went to Canada and did a 10-minute animation, which was inserted. We had to find a way for this thing to work in our story. And it's the one thing that survives, basically, from the special, because when he made his deal at Disney Plus, Boba Fett got his own series.
See,
so there you go.
So you have a lineage even to this day.
This day. That and Life Day, which is the holiday he invented for our show that never took. And so he did it at Disney Plus. He did it with Lego. They called it, they had a Star Wars holiday special, and they were celebrating Life Day for real. I mean, we celebrated it for real too, but nobody gave a rat's ass. And in the interim, the fans invented May the 4th be with you, May 4th coming up.
And he had no idea.
And he had no idea about that either. That was it. There is now a National Star Wars Day. Everything but proclaimed. So, but George, has he lives on a pile of cash. What can I tell you?
How hands-on was he? Did he give you a lot of freedom? Because it seems like you really had to construct. I always think, even I know something about show business, but you kind of think these ideas are like, we'll just throw this and throw that and throw Beatha in, and you actually had to construct a beginning, a middle, and an end.
He didn't envision B. Arthur, as I recall. He did have. He gave us a story. There was a story of several pages, and but it didn't make room for musical guests or anything like that. And it also didn't take into account what we could and what we could not feasibly shoot on the budget that we had. So, and then when he realized, he came down and had a meeting with the writers and the producers. And when he realized shortly thereafter what was actually going to happen, he hightailed it back to Marin, and we didn't really hear from him again. And I'm sure, beyond anybody, was hoping that the grave that we dug for the thing afterwards was deeper than it really was. It turned out to be fairly shallow because it came right back up. And after, what happened was the internet, and after the first three movies, the internet was invented, and people began watching them on YouTube, and this special showed up. And by that time, Star Wars had become the Scientology of the nerds, and the nerds were riled because they had a religioso fervor about it, and so they kept going after him, saying, "George, how could you betray us like this with this cheesy thing?" And he was really upset and really scared, and tried to buy up all the copies, tried to get it banned from the internet.
Really?
I think he was getting some serious, crazy cult-like death threats and activity like that. MAGA-like activity, I would like to point out.
And yet, when you talk about that after it aired, which was it Thanksgiving weekend?
It was the weekend before Thanksgiving, yeah.
Right. And you said, you kind of waited what would be the response, and the response was nothing.
The response was pretty much nothing. It was, as you might expect, because it was a world of ridiculous television shows. And it fit neatly into that world. And the reviews were, half of them kind of thought, well, this is interesting and unusual. And the other half thought, this is ridiculous and don't bother. And the ratings were good. And I mean, nobody called to say, this is your Emmy Award, this is your Peabody. It was just another one of those specials. I went on to whatever, Wayne Newton at SeaWorld, whatever the next one was, where Wayne singing to an orca. But Cherokee people, and the orca's looking at him like, who, what, me?
What I loved, again, so many things I didn't know. I didn't know that Carrie Fisher really wanted to sing. She was hell-bent on singing.
She, I met Carrie when she was in the chorus of Irene, which was her mother's show on Broadway. And she very much...
I saw Debbie and Irene. I saw it at the Cape Cod Melody Tent.
It was a huge hit. But Carrie wasn't in it for long because she came back because she wanted to get her recording career started. And she fancied herself kind of like Joni Mitchell. She didn't want to be like Debbie. That was what she knew. So one of the reasons that she took the show because George asked her to do it. But one of the reasons that she wanted to do the show, she said, I want to do a number. And she thought that she would do Joni Mitchell's song Green, which is kind of a Christmassy song, just a little green. And so we had to pitch it to Joni, who listened and went, no. And that's very of hers. And I said, you don't want to be like Debbie, but you're sitting there in that white dress with a Danish pastry on each ear, and you're strumming a guitar and singing. It's kind of like the singing nun. It's very redolent of your mother as the singing nun. And I can't help but think that comparison will be made. And so suddenly the idea of the guitar went out the window. And she finally sings in the finale. She sings this inspirational song, Ken and Mitzi Wiltroth, about Life Day.
And people should know they wrote a lot of special material for Carol Burnett and other people.
Carol Burnett, exactly right.
Yes.
Who I worked with.
How did B. Arthur get involved?
Well, the network wanted guest stars who were on the network, and B was Maude on CBS.
Okay.
And so we knew each other, and so I went to her and I said, come do this. And she said, only if I can sing. And I thought, she was Maude, and Maude didn't sing. But B had, started on Broadway. She was originally Yenta and Fiddler on the Roof, and she won a Tony for Mame, the Richard Charles. And she brought in a song that she had introduced off Broadway in the Threepenny Opera, which ran about 12 years. And it was the Alabama song. It was, oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Frank Zappa recorded it. David Bowie recorded it. Bette Midler recorded it. So she...
so naturally, B. Arthur wanted to do it.
B. wanted to do it. Of course, it ends with, I tell you I will die. It was not an up tune. But we had to go to the estate of Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill. She said, "This is my
Oh,
Brecht
Lotte
Weill."
wasn't going to let you have it.
I said, "It's your Weill Brecht piece. It's not going to happen." And the Brecht estate said 9, which I thought was the figure they were asking for payment, but no, in fact, it was just 9. So Ken and Missy again wrote her a very up-tempo kind of "those were the days, my friend" kind of song, and that's somewhere between being dark and being folksy and life affirming, and she loved doing that. She loved doing that, and of course she was singing it to a room full of aliens. And
yeah, you bring that up, that of course aliens in a lounge would have humans as the entertainment, but I never made that analogy. But how right you are.
She was the only human in the scene.
Human-ish.
The human-ish, yeah. Well, we had a boyfriend for her, Harvey Korman, as an alien with a hole in his head with where she poured his drinks. So,
which you called what?
No, but he wasn't that one. He was not. Cuntface was another one who had the face, which is a vagina, basically.
Oh, all right.
So that was Cuntface. But no, Harvey, I forget what Harvey's name was, but he was the momentary love interest. So B sang it because she wanted to sing, and she was not unhappy. I mean, it was a hard shoot, but she was not unhappy when it came out, because it did show the other side of it. And on Golden Girls, she got to sing a bunch of times. So
right,
and she had a special also. She had a musical special. I did not.
Oh, with Rock Hudson, was
Rock
it?
Hudson, yeah.
We know the famous number.
Yeah. So she did get those wishes were answered. But
was there anybody that you pitched?
Cher was going to be the fantasy that the old Wookiee see. And she dropped out the week before, and Diane Carroll stepped in, who was not on CBS, but she said that Harvey, of course, was on the Burnett show, and Art Carney, who had been on CBS, was he came back because it was a paycheck, I think. I mean, he got he'd won the Oscar already, and so he was like a movie star, and they wanted him badly, and I think he just liked the idea that he was translating everything for these Wookiees, because we couldn't use subtitles. Everybody had to translate what the Wookiees were saying, what all the characters were saying. Anybody who did not speak basic English or any English had to translate,
or any language at all.
It was a trial. It was difficult.
Well, you transition in the book, at least, from that to Paul Lynde.
Yeah.
And what I loved, again, there's insights into these people's characters. And now Paul Lynde, I do know a lot about, but what I think was great was, well, two things. First off, I had no idea that they tried to sort of get him a sitcom. I mean, I've seen the sitcom that he did that lasted 10 episodes, but that this was actually his second variety show.
Yeah, he had done the Paul Lynde special, which was a traditional kind of variety show where he got to sing and dance and tumble with guests, and they were Jack Albertson and Nancy Walker, who were also Broadway people. So that was fun. But when they were doing focus groups, they discovered that the show had gotten a big number, but every time in the two previous sitcom tryouts that he had, not tryouts, they were shows, they got a big number the first week and then it would drop. And I of course maintain that's because it was hard for him to be the center of anything on a weekly basis, or anything for that matter. And they said maybe the next one should be a themed show, so that it's not relying entirely on Paul the personality. There's a reason he's doing these things. And Halloween presented itself right away because he was already a witch. He was Uncle Arthur, the witch.
Well, that's true. He was.
The first Guncle, probably. And he confirmed bachelor uncle. So he was. So we knew the audience could accept it because he was already a witch, and they kind of would conflate that. That was a good thing. and of course it presented a lot of great stories that we could do, and that was fun to come up with the stuff that we did come up with, and it took the burden off him. He did have to open the show and explain,
which is brilliant, because you go through all the other holidays.
Yeah, we did that as a joke because he keeps thinking it's the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, and that way we got in Margaret Hamilton, who would wind up.
How did that happen?
Yes.
How did that happen?
She was. I didn't call her. Somebody who knew her called her, and she was sitting at home in Gramercy Park, New York, and nobody was asking her to do anything. She had done the touring company of A Little Night Music, playing the Hermione Gingold part.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Playing Glynis John's part, and that was a big success. But nobody was coming to her saying, do a musical. So she thought this would be fun, and they were always coming to her asking to revive The Wicked Witch of the West. But she thought, well, doing it with Paul Lynde would be something else. I don't think she knew that we also were going after Billy Hayes for Witchy Poo. But she didn't mind when that was revealed. She thought it made perfect sense. And
were they friends offset?
I don't know. I think they were, but I don't. Billy lived out here, and Margaret lived in New York, so I don't know that they actually knew each other. But they had a great time together. I was with them a lot, and we had a lot of fun. So. So she had a good time doing it. I mean, it was hard work because she was much older, and all that makeup and all that stuff, and she, spent a lot of time, hot lights, the whole deal.
And she looks fantastic.
Great. I remember having lunch in the commissary and with her in full costume. And it was the walk of the ABC commissary. She's sitting there, just quietly having chicken soup.
and whose idea was? Whose idea was it to have Betty White as the antithesis?
Well, we wanted we wanted to load it up with guest stars, of course, and Betty White was very hot at the time, probably doing the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Of course, she had a couple of other failed sitcoms, and she could only give us a day. So since we had The Wicked Witch of the West, we thought, well, how about The Good Witch of the East? Glinda, before she was known as a Galinda, she was merely Glinda. And we flew her in on a bubble. I mean, she came in. We couldn't use the bubble because MGM owned the bubble. So we had her nauseatingly circling in some sort of a cumulus cloud. And she could only had a day, so she didn't have a costume change. And she was a plot device, basically. And she was getting a lot of money for coming in for a day and being this thing. And she did get a kick out of Paul. They were on game shows and stuff together. And she
sure.
She was a real trooper, Betty. She was terrific. I loved her. And she comes thinking that she's trying to convince. First of all, she thinks she's meeting Paul Newman, so she's already pissed off. And she realized that she was coming because she wanted to get Paul Newman to be the spokesperson for the witches of the world. Because he said witches have gotten a bad rap. And so she got Paul Lynde as a spokesperson. So he doesn't want to do it. And then they give him 3 wishes in the traditional witch sense. And that, of course, set us up for 3 sketches and musical numbers, which is how you construct a variety special of the old.
Okay. Yeah. Now, speaking of that,
you don't have Adele singing at the planetarium. You have to do it the other way.
Well, whose idea was it for Paul Lynde to be a trucker?
I wish I could say it was mine. It might have been mine. Truck stop, trucking candor.
Oh, they were big then. Yes.
And trucking was very big. Truck culture was very big. And so the idea of him, it may have been my idea because it was so the opposite of the way he was perceived. And of course, we made him the rhinestone trucker.
Of course you did.
Rhinestone cowboy because he was him. And he, of course, jumped at the idea because it was so ridiculous. And he loved the stranger it was, the better for him. In another sketch, he was sort of Rudolph Valentino. He loved going as far away from Paul Lynde as he could, which is his desire in his career was to act in real roles that were not Paul Lynde. But his signature role from Bye Bye Birdie cursed him forever because he became that person. And when he sang "Kids," and his kids said to him, "I respect you," and he said, "Who wants respect from a 10-year-old?" And that was his whole character. I mean, nothing was good enough. Everything was bad. It was like, and he was bitter about it, mixed with occasional sour. So that was.
And those were on the good days.
Yeah, right. And that was hard for him to overcome as an actor, and he was obviously a very strong actor, but his brand was so prominent that he couldn't overcome it. So we just tried to make him more ridiculous, and that worked. That worked. It's one of those shows every year at Halloween because nobody gets slashed.
Right. No, I mean, was he happy with how he was being handled? How much input did he have?
Oh, he had a lot, but I think when he would rebel, his management would say to him, this is what you can do. I mean, you're asking us to get you stuff that you can't get. And it wasn't, I don't think, because he was gay, because that was never an issue. I mean, he was the confirmed bachelor, and back in that time, nobody was out. Just professional homosexuals were out. Homosexual professionals continued doing what they did, and he was. It was because he was a flavor, and it was so Paul Lynde. You couldn't get away from that, and it wasn't like Brando or Olivier who could take on various makeups and dialects, and whether Paul just couldn't do that realistically. So. That was why he didn't get further, and they would say to him, "Well, this is what you can do, and it works for you, and it's an extension of better than sitting in a square and doing a zinger. I mean, this is showing more sides." So
and of course,
had him the money, it was always a factor.
And speaking of money, how was this, using certainly Wizard of Oz stuff, was there a lot of royalties that had to be paid to use those references?
I believe so, yeah. I believe so. I mean, we couldn't use the Good Witch of the East because we were using the Wicked Witch of the West and her look. So they had to pay Metro for the look and all of that. And it was an expensive show. I mean, you can tell by looking at it. I would bet. Yeah. We had an elevator on the set. We had a Mack truck that we used on the set. It was and a huge cast of guests with, Florence Henderson and Rob Kelly.
So let's talk about our good friend, Florence.
There's Flo.
Yes, she is. There. Yes. Well, you look fantastic, by the way.
I see those pictures, I go, wow, I'm heavier there. But Flo looks fabulous. Flo always looks fabulous.
She always did. What I love about her singing Old Black Magic is it is exactly what you would see her do on a Jerry Lewis telethon.
Well, that's true. Absolutely. Yes. I know.
Did she enjoy doing it?
On the Brady Bunch, we did the same thing. It was she sang songs that Carol Brady certainly would never sing, although she was playing Carol Brady singing those songs, and I mean, I wanted to go farther afield, but they drew the line. I wanted to get the song I wanted to sing that she probably would have been the first white singer to sing. I'm trying to think of what it was. It was a kind of a bluesy sort of black song, but she would have done a great rendition of it. Anyway, it'll come back to me. But she sang much more sophisticated stuff on the Brady Bunch than you could imagine.
But now, what about Florence and Paul's kiss?
Well, that was quite wonderful. That was in the sketch.
Yes.
Where playing somebody very, very British, very, very, Edna Thompson, upper class, but not even beyond. I mean, crazy Diana Rigg. And Paul was Rudolph Valentino. He was the Sheik, and
sort of Florence of Arabia, the famous joke.
Noel Coward, yeah, Florence of Arabia, and she, and And they kiss at one point, and they do a long kiss, and they held it, didn't break or anything. And then they break, and she says, "I'm ready when you are." And I think I set that up badly. He says, "I'm going to kiss you," and he kisses her, and she says, "I'm ready when you are," meaning kiss me now, not meaning let's go to act 2. Let's go to second base. So.
Well, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the Brady Bunch Variety Hour, but what I didn't know was that you don't really confirm it, but you had a feeling that the first choice was to do the Partridge Family Variety Hour.
Oh, yeah. Well, I knew that. I mean, Fred Silverman invented the host, the group host concept with Sonny and Cher, Tony Orlando and Dawn, Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell sisters. He had Donnie and Marie. He thought in an era where it was hard to find a Carol Burnett or a Flip Wilson or Dean Martin or Mac Davis, people who had successful variety shows, if you created a team, they each had less to carry, and the team could carry the whole thing. This lasted until Pink Lady and Jeff, which was kind of the Titanic that hit the iceberg in that concept. But so he thought the Partridge Family was natural because in their sitcom, they were a singing family. They were on a tour bus. They were on the road, and they were Shirley Jones and David Cassidy were singers, and they didn't want to do it. So the companion piece in that half hour on Friday night was the Brady Bunch, and the Brady kids had an act that they would play state fairs and things like that.
Sure.
And Barry Williams and Maureen McCormick could actually sing and dance, and the other 4 kids could just get by, but nobody ever considered having Florence and Bob. And when he said the Brady Bunch, they all thought it was going to be yet another iteration of the Brady Bunch where there would be somehow musical numbers, like they would go see somebody in concert and that person would do a musical number. It never occurred to them that there was going to be a show where there was a Brady storyline,
right?
And integrated into that were musical numbers. That the idea was that they were the stars of their TV series, a variety series, and every week you watch them put the show together while having some Brady storyline go through it. And they were dealing with Lucille Ball and Charo and all these other people who were going to be guest stars on the show. And they were kind of stunned when they found out that's what it was. Probably because they didn't find out till day 1 of rehearsal, where they were handed all this music they had to learn, and they were informed that the choreographer was waiting for them on stage 3 to teach them dance steps and all that. And of course, especially Bob Reed was particularly freaked out because he was a serious actor, although he's a great light comedian. You know, he never factored this in. So he had.
Yeah, I didn't know that he had replaced Redford in Barefoot in the Park.
Yeah, he did on Broadway,
which you mentioned. I thought that was so interesting, and also that they didn't necessarily know this was going to become a series. They kind of thought they were doing a one-off.
At first, they thought they were doing a one-off, and it was such a strangely programmed series. It was on a wheel, which means it was every 3rd week with the Hardy Boys.
Oh, right. I forgot about the wheel.
So we only did 9 of them and that was a season, because between preemptions and whatnot, we only had to do 9 to fill out the thing. So it was a short order, but we were all well paid. But if we had done 22, it would have been obviously different. But so it was kind of a minimal investment, but for most of them, they weren't doing much else. You know, and Eve Plum, who had gone into TV movies and had a hit, wouldn't come back because I'm not going back. And so that's how we got Fake Jan.
I don't know if you want to tell this on the air. Do you feel like telling the Marie Osmond Ovitz story?
No, let them read the book.
It's I don't want to ruin it, but it's just such a great story. Yeah, it's great. Also, I didn't know, but I guess it makes sense because I did go back and look at these. There was only a live audience for the finale.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Which only makes sense.
You hear them laughing. There's a laugh track going on. But then that was the Brady Bunch. You know, the Brady Bunch was shot like a movie. It was one camera on a set at Paramount, and they'd never worked in front of an audience before, except at the state fairs and things. So, but even doing finales, we shoot in front of the audience, and musical numbers generally. They had dialogue, they had things, and they were theoretically in character. So, so it was a stretch because they'd never done that before.
Well, speaking of a stretch, you did appear as a Hell's Angel.
I certainly did. And
how did that happen?
Not the only time. I did that on Santa Barbara, the soap opera, also.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I played a hippie biker priest. It was a soap opera.
I don't think I have now. I don't have that picture.
2 days. It was wonderful.
Did you like putting yourself into shows? Because I know that, you started out performing.
I think it's no, I didn't like doing it because I think it's an exercise in egomania, but they wanted me to. They thought, they kept saying, oh, he'll be funny doing this. It was, I forget, they stopped at a roadside thing and I was a biker and Carol Brady is there. I don't know. She's run away, or I forget what the plot was, but I only know that photo I've been looking at for 40 years. But so I thought it was funny because it was, I was a sight gag basically, so I didn't have much to do.
Well, speaking of photos you've looked at for 40 years, and I never saw this, I didn't know any of this story. Tell us about this photo, please.
Well, that's Charo. On the left, a lot of hair in that picture. My God, there's hair. And she's holding the very script that I co-wrote for a special that was sort of it was not a backdoor pilot, but it was, it would have been, but
it was conceived as a series.
Well, actually, there was another show. She had a sitcom done for her that was called Charo and the Marine, which sounds like a porno. So they changed the title to Charo and the Sergeant. And
so much cleaner.
She played, it was kind of like I Dream of Jeannie. She played Charo, who marries a Marine and lives on the base in military housing and has to mingle with all the Marine wives and continue her life. But she's not famous Charo. She's just a woman named Charo. Yeah, who's flamboyant and plays a flamenco guitar and all of that. And they did the pilot, and everybody laughed, and they said, "But how do we sustain this? I mean, it's an ultimate fish out of water story. But how many things can she discover? She discovers a supermarket. She discovers a car wash. She discovers a bake sale. I mean." How long can they go on with this? So they said, we're not going to do this, but and then I think somebody from her team came to the table with a tape of the Jack Benny show, the Jack Benny program, they called it. And Jack Benny, big hit, Jack Benny played himself, and he was doing a TV show every week, and he had a house in Beverly Hills, and his driver, Rochester, and his announcer, Dennis Day, and Don DeFore, and his wife, Mary Livingston. And then he would go into the studio and do the Jack Benny show with the guests. It was Marilyn Monroe, various people. Sure. Marilyn's the most noted one on the thing. And they thought this is a good idea because Charo can be that person. And she's doing a show and we have a guest star. So they paid her off for not doing the series. And
the Sergeant.
Right, and this had a back end deal in case they decided to do a series of it, and so we did this one show called Charo, and Mike Connors who was Mannix at the time.
Right,
he was the guest star, and it was all about Charo and her life. We didn't have Cugat; he didn't want to be involved. They were still married, and
they were. Will you tell the story? Will you tell the story about Charo going to City Hall?
Oh yeah. So So at one point,
Her sister told me this story, so I can
yes,
swear
Carmen,
it's true because Carmen went. Right.
yes, Carmen went. She did. They went together. Um, we had we had a joke we wanted to do about her baby pictures. And pictures of her as a little girl. And we said we wanted the pictures so that we could Photoshop them. With the name, that word didn't exist in those days, but we could play around with them, and we wanted to have the baby be wearing a beaded gown, with boobs, and the little girl, all the other little girls were nuns, and she was like in a beady gown with a wimple, and we thought that was hysterical. So we asked her for child. She says, "Oh, I have no childhood. Everything burned in the fire." I said, "Oh, yeah, the house burned." She said, "Everything went." And she said, in fact, she said, she then said, I had to get a new passport. When I got the passport, they had my age wrong. In fact, there was a typo. They had me 10 years older. So she went down to, and then they went to the passport authority, and they said, "Well, you have to give us proof." And she said, "Oh, well, City Hall and
The
my
fire
burned down, so there's no records of anything." So they said, "Well, if you can bring in witnesses who will swear." So she went in with her sister Carmen and a whole bunch of her relatives to say that instead of being 39, she was 29, and they said, "Okay." So officially, she was 10 years younger than she really was. And then everybody in the family came back using the same excuse and the same witness, and they got their age changed because they all said there were typos on all of their passports. So now I don't know how, I don't know how old she really is now. I mean, she might be hitting 90. I don't know.
That's the irony. It is at this age she should say she's 10 years older because she looks incredible.
Exactly. She wasn't that much older than I am, but it was enough. It just made all of us kind of laugh and gasp at the same time. But she's been through a lot since. I mean, after she had a husband, and then he killed himself, and
awful. And her son,
also put a kid through Harvard.
Yep. He's very smart.
She's a fabulous character, and I say she was one of the first people who lined up to help in AIDS fundraising, and she has always been there for that. So she's okay with me.
And she is always 100. Oh, excuse me.
The show was ridiculous and was worth writing about.
She's also 100% authentic. She totally believes in what she's doing. And she takes herself very seriously unless she's come up with the joke or she knows where the joke is going.
She's still using stuff. Use Republicans and Democrats. Still using that.
She's
priceless. She plays flamenco guitar. That's all for real. She studied with Sylvia, and she really does know how to do that.
And she's just fun. And Carmen is just as much fun. Tell the story about Carol Channing, that basically all these old ladies were getting shows, and Carol wanted a show.
Carol, she did. Yeah, it was Golden Girls era, and they were all getting deals, and she wanted a deal, and she was very friendly with Barbara Walters. She mentored Barbara's daughter, and she said, "Well, she's a tall girl, and I'm a tall girl." So Barbara would call me and say, "Help." So she
and Barbara was still married to Merv.
Barbara was with Merv, and Merv was running Lorimar, which was a big studio like Dallas and other shows. And over dinner one night, Barbara said to Merv, "You got to get her a show." And so I got a call saying, "What do you have for?" Because I wrote for Carol's act. "What do you have for Carol in the show?" So Lynn Roth and I came up with an idea for a show, and she loved the idea. And we wrote the script, and she hated the script and would never tell us why.
And yet you said everybody else who read it loved it.
Everybody else loved it. They loved it. And I asked her husband, Charles Lowe, and he said, "She's crazy sometimes." That was the explanation. And of course, I realized he was true because she was, crazy like a fox. I never got into it with her, but tomorrow I'm doing the LA Festival, LA Times Book Festival, and the last time I was there was with Carol when she had her memoir.
There you are.
That she was part black, which was a
Yes.
great shocker in that book. And she said, "Well,
she also revealed something else to you."
Well, oh yeah, she said she only slept with Charles twice during the during the marriage, and I said, "Yeah, you should call your memoir Twice Upon a Mattress."
No, that wasn't even the story I was going to have you tell.
You were at the festival,
yes,
and I was trying, and I said, and some of the people who succeeded you in Dolly, you were not so crazy about, like Ethel Merman. Oh, I can't talk about Ethel Merman. And she said, "Well, could you describe her?" She said, "Oh, yeah, it's one word, and I couldn't possibly say it." And I said, "Does it rhyme with hunt?" And she said, "Yes." And it was a gigantic laugh because the timing was so perfect. Like she had to think about this, right? She had to think about that if it rhymed. So, I mean, not for nothing was she the huge star that she was. She was quite brilliant, and but she lived a lot of the time in her own construct, like Charo does. Very little delineation between the onstage personality and offstage personality.
And the show that you wrote was inspired by this person.
My mother, my adopted mother, I found out later. Well, I always knew. I was 4 days old when I was adopted. But that's Henny Vilanch, and the show was called Henny after her, which Carol thought was fabulous because she's met her. And in case you're wondering who I am, that's Edna Turnblad after the show, after performing Hairspray.
Yeah, I took that with it was the dress rehearsal in New Jersey.
Was that when it was shot? That could be.
I took that picture. Yes, that was me.
I didn't know you took that picture.
I took that famous photo.
Newark, New Jersey.
Because here we are.
Oh, there we are. Exactly right.
So,
wow.
Yeah. That was the invited dress.
That's right.
And of course you were fabulous in that, I must say.
Well, it was the first time we did it for an audience, and Jack O'Brien, who directed the show, directed our tour and the original. Mm-hmm. Warned us beforehand. He said because the whole cast of Hairspray was coming. It was on Broadway, and he said they're not going to laugh at anything except the fuck ups, because they're going to be in shock because they're going to realize that somebody else could play these parts, which they've been playing for a year to sell out audiences. They're going to realize that somebody else can do this. So don't expect a reaction.
And did it for a long time, I might add.
Yeah.
How long did you do Edna?
I did 2 years. I did a year on the road, and then I went to Broadway for a year.
And, well, I guess L.A. is the road.
L.A. was the road. We did, I think, 10 weeks at the Pantages.
My God.
But, down the hill from my house, so that was fun.
Yeah, an easy commute. So let's talk about this.
Oh my God, Caitlin.
I think you can call him Bruce there. It's fine.
In fact, I changed my name from Caitlin to Bruce.
There you go. You swapped. Exactly. So Can't Stop the Music. But let's talk about it.
I met him. I think I met him when Alan Carr, I was writing Can't Stop the Music. I wrote the first 342 drafts. And we and we pitched him the idea, and he loved it. He wanted to, he wanted to be a movie star. He was very eager, and it didn't really work out. But then, of course, later years, bigger changes happened to him. And when I wrote the book, I had a great editor who's a kind of a gay activist in Chicago, and he said, "Well, your dead name, Caitlyn Jenner." And I said, "I beg your pardon." I said, "First of all, this was 40 years ago. He was Bruce Jenner. Right. He was one of the most famous people in the world, and everybody knew him as Bruce Jenner." I said, "Secondly,"
and he's credited as Bruce.
"Secondly, I'm a gay icon. Let them come after me if they think I made a boo-boo. And third, I will call Caitlin and ask her if it's okay." And So I did, and Caitlin said, "Of course, I was Bruce then." So I thought, okay,
Exactly.
got that. And the publisher said, "Yeah, you're right. You can't be referring to him as Caitlyn Jenner in that context. Can he kiss Valerie Perrine and all this kind of stuff? I mean, no, that's not what it was about then. You're adding a layer of fantasy to it. So, but yes, there he was.
What was the experience like?
At Hollywood Squares. He was still Bruce.
Probably. Right. What was the experience of doing that movie like? Because it's a mess.
I got fired after I asked for more money after the fourth rewrite I'd done for a different leading lady. And then, of course, the next day after I was fired, Alan started calling me and asking me for advice on this and that and the other thing. And so, but they shot it in New York, and mostly. And I didn't go near it when they were shooting it, so I only had the experience secondhand. And I had a lot of stuff in the run up to the movie. There was a lot of drama because Victor Willis, who was the lead singer, quit the picture, and he was married
from the Village People. For people who don't know,
he was and he was the one straight member of the band, and then he was afraid he'd be forever typed as a gay guy in the movie when the movie came out. And we had to write a part in for his wife, who was a woman who became Felicia Rashad. She was Felicia.
Oh,
Allen.
I didn't know that. Yeah, right.
And she was an act that Jacques Morali, who produced Village People, she was a disco act. She did a Josephine Baker disco album. There's a picture of her with a skirt made of bananas.
The bananas.
And Felicia, because that's how she spells it, Felicia. The minute that Victor quit the show, Alan fired Felicia. But it was in the script, so he had to find somebody. So he went into a Rolodex to find people, and he Altavis Davis early on.
Altavis.
Altavis, who had been Altavis Gore when she was on Broadway in Golden Boy with Sammy, and now is Altavis Davis, and jumped into it and was fine in it. She's Altavis is a terrific performer, and so there was all that. There was no end of drama of all sorts, and now Victor, of course, wound up being the owner of the Village People after everybody else.
Ironically.
And so he gets them to go to Trump rallies because he thinks YMCA is I don't know what he thinks, it's an aerobics exercise.
How much of what you wrote ended up in that movie?
He what?
How much of what you wrote ended up in the movie?
I think all that's left is Tammy Grimes. Tammy Grimes plays a character I ripped off from Kay Thompson in Funny Face. And she and her assistant, her man-hungry assistant, Marilyn Sokol, I think they represent Valerie Perrine, who is the girl who puts together the group with her friend, Steve Guttenberg, her platonic friend, who's not gay. He just doesn't have a girlfriend. And she has some funny stuff to do. And I think that's what, now and again, I'll recognize a line when I sit through it periodically when they have like hate screenings of it, and I get to do a Q&A afterwards. And so it's fresh.
Oh, I would love to do that. I would go to one of those if you were there.
I'm doing it somewhere. I forget. There's one coming up. I don't know why. I don't know why. Because it's like 45 years ago already. So can you believe?
There are things that I learned it seemed like a bad idea at the time. I did not know that you were, I don't want to say in line, but certainly you were asked to do a talk show. You could have been Andy Cohen.
Well, except Andy Cohen stepped in and became Andy Cohen.
Well, that's how Bravo. He is.
It was for Bravo. And Bravo at the time was being run by a woman named Frances Berwick, who was at NBC, which owned Bravo. And actually, it was Westinghouse owned it. NBC bought it while we were in production. And what happened was they wanted a feel of the late night talk show, so they did 3 pilots with 3 different guys. And then they discovered that they had one feed. So if you put the thing on 11 o'clock in New York time, it was 8 o'clock LA. And they didn't know what to do about that because they thought they were going for a more adult thing. So they just didn't do it. And then NBC bought the network and they put on reruns of The West Wing. And then Andy Cohen came in and turned it into reality television. So, but we did the pilot, and my mother was my announcer and my sidekick. And Fenton and Randy Barbado and Fenton Bailey, who produced RuPaul, who I had worked with when he had a talk show on VH1 and a Vegas act that we did. They produced it, and it looked great. I was driven on stage by Kato Kalin in a gold golf cart. And my guests were Debbie Reynolds, Tim Curry, and David Hyde Pierce. And
so it's a very straight audience you're looking for.
Exactly right. Sure. Well, we knew the demo. We figured that. And hey, has Bravo gotten less gay?
No. Did you enjoy it? You talk about in the book. I found it so interesting because, again, I know you. I've seen you interview people. I've been interviewed by you. You're a natural at this, and yet you said that you really didn't understand the role of a talk show host.
Well, you have to be interested in people, which I am, but you also have to kind of fake it. Now, I was lucky because these were friends of mine, and I'm interested in them, and we had a rapport. But I think what I was reacting to was if it had been picked up. I mean, I was good for one monologue because I had an act, and you basically reshaped that for the monologue. But to have to come on every night and be interested in people who I had no knowledge of and would have to have done homework on, and to come up with topical stuff every night, even though I would have writers and whatnot, it just struck me. I wasn't exactly sure that was the skill set that I had. I would have liked to have tried to prove it that I did have them, but it didn't work out that way. So I was kind of uneasy, and I was also my mother, who was vivacious and fabulous, froze in front of the camera. As many real people,
civilians,
civilians do that, and she put on such a great act in her life that I figured that's easy. She's a natural. But no, there's a difference when they have to do it on cue with lights. And I think at her point in her life, she was very concerned about how she looked, and the lights were pounding down on her. And she was quite vain. In fact, my favorite story about her is when she had cataract surgery. And she called me after the surgery. She said, "Bruce, I'm standing in the foyer of the condo and looking in the mirror. Why didn't you tell me I look like this?" Once the cataracts were gone, she could see what she actually looked like. Cataracts, and when you have them, you're like, everything is kind of sepia and lovely.
It's like a dream sequence always.
Exactly right. It's like you're Lucy Asmame looking out at the world through all that gauze.
I know that we've talked about this before, but I just want to touch on, it seems to me, had there not been Bette Midler, there would not be Bruce Vilanch. How true is that?
Well, I say in the book in the acknowledgement that
she gets a great plug at the beginning.
Changed my life before she changed yours. She's been my inspiration to muse, and probably it was just one of those things where she got stuff from me and I got stuff from her, and the genuine collaboration. But who's to say? Who's to know what would have happened if I hadn't met her? It's like, it's like an episode of Twilight Zone or something. I mean, I can't deny it. I can't deny that she isn't part of the makeup of the whole thing. But you are the sum total of all the different parts that contribute to you if it works out. Yeah.
How much of her has really rubbed off on you? I mean, I think of you as so authentically you, but have you been like a sponge and taken things from all the people you've met?
Well, she inspired me. I have to say, in the documentary Get Bruce, which about me, which was produced by Harvey Weinstein, who never laid a hand on me.
Damn it!
Why not me?
Thank you.
She says, "Well, he was kind of surly when I met him. He had a temper and all that." And she's completely right. I mean, I got happy working with her. It was all. I mean, as crazy as she could get, there was always a smile there, and there was always joy. And and I didn't realize I didn't have that until I met Bette. I mean, she was my own personal joy buzzer. So that made a substantial difference. Yes, absolutely.
I will just share just a brief story, which is that when somewhere near the beginning of you and I meeting, I think we were at a Jennifer Lewis show. Why wouldn't we be? And you had said, yeah, right. And you had said something about, oh, are you going to see Bette when she comes to town next week? And she said, no. And I said, oh, that's why we couldn't go out next week. And Jennifer turned and said, well, why didn't you bring Billy to meet Bette? And you turned and said, because I want to stay friends with her. Well, there you go. You also didn't bring Jennifer, so there you go also. Our good friend Jennifer Lewis. We have
when you possibly can.
Exactly. We have comments. Just Mickey Chase saying, "Love you both." Thank you, Mickey Chase. Thomas, love this. People are loving this. Oh, let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, well, this is a good friend of both of ours. Andrew, great to see you both. Just because we did bring up Andrew, otherwise known as Will Clark, here's a photo of Bruce and I in the day, because as I constantly say, if you got a good Speedo shot, you never lose it.
I know. And all I can think of is Santa Claus Goes to Boca.
I found, I don't know if you remember, it was when the LA Blade started. They had asked me, I think the one and only thing I did for the LA Blade was to do 20 questions with you. So I just want to ask you some of the questions and see if your answers have changed.
Excellent.
But let's take Andrew can go off. Oh, there. Oh, look, he sent us hearts. There you go.
Black
They
hearts,
love us.
yes.
Well, you know. Okay, so let me... okay. Questions are, who are your LGBT heroes? Or if you had to pick one, you actually only gave me one.
Did I answer this already, or
you did? Yes, you answered these. Who would be your LGBT? So I just asked, who is your LGBT hero?
Wow, I don't know what
who would it be now?
Gosh, I don't know at this point. I don't even know who I said then, because there are so many. So I don't know.
Well, yours then was Noel Coward.
Oh, that's great. Well, I must have thought about it.
You said he lived the life he wanted to live, and nobody seemed to make a bother about it. Plus, he was funny as shit.
Good. Well, I can't top that.
All right. Well, this is interesting. I'm curious how you feel about this now. Describe your dream wedding.
Well, let me see. It would probably involve a football team. I would have to have quite a number of rings. I would guess they wouldn't be put in the conventional place where rings are put.
No.
There would be cheesecake, and
there would have to be.
I must have thought about this when I answered you.
No, maybe not. No, we neither of us we rarely think before we speak. So, that's interesting. Curious now. What non-LGBT issue are you passionate about now?
Palestine, Jews. I mean, the Middle East. But I don't want to get into it. But
that's what you said then.
All I can ask is, who kidnaps babies? That's all I.
Wow, that would be good. What's been the most memorable pop culture moment of your lifetime? I'm sure it's in this book. It seemed like a bad idea at the time.
It could have been. I was at Woodstock, but I don't think That's not in the book. Is that what I
That,
said?
that no, but that was your answer.
It was, yeah. It was Woodstock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you already answered this. If your life were a book, what would the title be?
Well,
I think we know that. What would you walk across hot coals for? I don't know who made me ask you these questions.
walk across hot coals? I don't know.
I would not walk across hot coals for anything.
It would have to be to prevent something happening to somebody I really cared about, I guess.
Oh, you're a better person than I am, Bruce
But
Vilanch.
I can't think of a joke because
No.
hot coals kind of kill a joke for me. So
Unless you're wearing shoes, I suppose. All right, well, this is as good a place as any to end.
right.
What do you wish you had known at 18?
That I was okay. That I didn't deserve getting beaten up by myself every night for things that I perceived I should have done that didn't do. That life would go on and it would all be fine and work out. And that there you can't really you can't kill pain with pizza.
But it helps.
It certainly did.
I love you, you know that. And I love that anytime I ask you to do anything, unless walk over hot coals, you'll say
really.
yes.
A short sizzling list.
I can't wait to get back to LA and hopefully we'll get together soon in person.
All right, you will do it.
Oh, we should also tell people before we go out and see the Studio One documentary. We're both in it.
We are.
And we hosted together the Last Dance.
We did. And the documentary, I've gone around the country to various festivals with it. What's kind of amazing about it is it's unexpectedly moving. People think it's going to be ooh, ooh, and all of that. And there's all that in there. But at the same time, it's about a community rallying to loss when AIDS happens and preserving a certain kind of gay culture. And it's a tribute to the people who were gone. And I don't think people are expecting that. And it's certainly worth your time because
definitely you can get it online. It's not only a time capsule. You don't have to know anything about Studio One, which was a big nightclub in Hollywood, but you'll also learn about survival and joy. And that's what I came away from. So, And what makes me happy is having you here. Bruce Vilanch, thank you for being on Billy Masters Live. Right. We'll talk soon. Bye, honey. Everybody, thank you for watching Billy Masters Live. You never know when we'll pop up. We will be back at some point. You can check this out on YouTube. We will link to Bruce's book. And thank you for watching Billy Masters Live. I've been your host, Billy Masters. Bye, guys.